You know, Alex, I've spent 30 years building things. I've mastered the art of joinery. I can weld a bead that looks like a stack of dimes, and I can turn a bowl so thin you can see through it. But there is one thing that still makes me want to lock the shop door and go take a nap in the woods.
Let me guess. It's white, it's heavy, and if you touch it, your entire life becomes a cloud of chalky regret.
Drywall, specifically finishing drywall. Here's the thing nobody tells you. Drywall isn't a construction project. It's a psychological test. It's the only trade where the better you are, the less people see of your work. If you're perfect, it's invisible. If you're human, well, everyone knows exactly where you stood on a Tuesday afternoon.
Every time I see a DIY drywall video, it's a guy in a pristine white shirt, and he makes it look like he's icing a cake. Then I try it, and I look like I've been through a flour mill explosion, and my walls look like the surface of the moon.
What they don't put in the manual, or those 20-minute YouTube tutorials, is that the magic happens in the hanging, not just the mudding. Most people think they can just slap the boards up any which way because the mud will hide it. Let's just say I paid tuition on that lesson back in the 90s. I spent 3 weeks sanding because I didn't spend 3 hours hanging it right.
Wait, hold on. You're telling me the hanging part matters. I thought it was just screw it to the studs, fill the gaps with goop, and sand until your arms fall off.
That is exactly how you end up with a wall that looks like a topographical map of the Andes. The pros, like Jeff from Home Renovision or the folks at Mueller's Construction, they'll tell you it starts with the planning. You want the fewest seams possible. That means horizontal hanging.
Okay, but why? Gravity is already working against me. Why would I want to hold a 4x8 sheet sideways when I can just stand it up?
Because what the old timers know, but don't share right away, is that most houses aren't straight. If you stand sheets up vertically, every single stud that's slightly bowed or out of plumb creates a visible hump in your seam. If you run them horizontally, you're jumping across those studs. Plus, it puts your main seam at waist height. Would you rather finish a seam comfortably at elbow level or spend all day on your knees and a ladder for a floor-to-ceiling vertical joint?
Valid point. I am a fan of not being on my knees. But what about the butt joints? The ends where there's no tapered edge. Those are the bane of my existence.
Nobody warns you about this, but those factory edges, the long sides, are actually thinned out. They're designed to hold the tape and mud so it stays flush with the wall. The ends of the sheet, those are flat. If you just butt them together and tape over them, you're creating a bump. Ask me how I know. I once tried to hide a butt joint in a hallway with a light at the end. It looked like a speed bump for ghosts.
A speed bump for ghosts. That's every rental apartment I've ever lived in. So what's the pro move? Do we just avoid them?
You minimize them. Stagger your joints. Never ever let four corners meet in a cross. It's like a bullseye for cracks. You want T-joints. And if you're really feeling pro, you use back blocking or you specifically plan your layout so those joints happen over a cavity rather than a stud, using a recessed piece of wood to pull the edges back. It creates a fake taper.
Okay, let's talk about the goop. The mud. I go to the big box store and there are 5 different colored lids. Green, blue, lightweight, setting type. It's like a secret code.
This is where most beginners die on the hill. Here's what I wish someone had told me. All purpose is great for the first coat because it has more glue in it. It sticks the tape down. But don't you dare try to do a final finish with it unless you want to spend the next 48 hours sanding. It dries like concrete.
So blue lid for the win.
Blue lid, the lightweight stuff, for your topping and finishing. It sands like a dream. But then there's hot mud, the stuff that comes in a bag and you mix with water. That stuff doesn't dry by evaporation, it hardens by a chemical reaction. You can get 20-minute mud and it'll be hard as a rock before you finished your coffee.
See, that sounds like a disaster waiting to happen for me. I'd have a bucket of stone and a half-finished wall.
I've thrown away more than one bucket because I thought I was faster than the chemistry. Learned that one the hard way, but hot mud is the secret to a one-day repair. If you use regular mud, you're waiting 24 hours between coats. With hot mud, you can do 3 coats in an afternoon. Just don't use it for your final skim unless you're a wizard. It's a beast to sand.
Okay, so green for the tape, blue for the pretty stuff. But what about the tape itself? Paper or mesh? Because the mesh is sticky, and frankly, I need all the help I can get.
Avoid the mesh with regular mud.
What? Why? It's so much easier.
Mesh is stronger in one way, but it stretches. If you use mesh with air-dry mud, it will crack. Guaranteed. If you use mesh, you must use hot mud for that first coat because it's rigid. But for a beginner, paper tape is king. It's thinner, it doesn't stretch, and it gives you a much better finish. The trick is wetting the tape or making sure your mud is thin enough, like pancake batter, to really soak into the paper.
Pancake batter. Got it. So we're not going for peanut butter consistency?
Peanut butter is for filling holes. For taping, you want it creamy. If you put it on too thick, you're just creating more work for your future self. And future self is usually very cranky about sanding.
Okay, Tiger, let's talk about the 3-coat rule. Is it really 3, or is that just what they tell us to keep us busy?
It's the minimum. The part they leave out of the YouTube tutorials is that it's not about how much mud you put on, it's about how much you take off. Coat 1, bed the tape, use a 6-inch knife. Coat 2, cover the tape, use an 8 or 10-inch knife. Coat 3, the feather, use a 12-inch knife. The goal is to make the joint so wide, like 12 to 16 inches wide, that the eye can't see the transition. You're tricking the light.
That's the drywaller's magic trick. It's not flat. It's just a very, very gentle hill.
Exactly. Don't ask me how I figured this out, but trying to sand it flat is a fool's errand. You're trying to blend it smooth. And speaking of sanding, Alex, don't do what I did on my first house.
What did you do?
I didn't cover the return vents for the HVAC. I sanded an entire living room without a vacuum attachment. 2 hours later, I walked into the kitchen, and my wife was standing there, and everything, the toaster, the fruit bowl, the cat, was covered in a 1/4 inch of white powder.
Oh no, not the cat.
The cat looked like a Victorian ghost. I was sleeping on the couch for a week. Seriously, what the old-timers know, use a damp sponge for small repairs to keep the dust down, or buy a sanding pole with a vacuum hose. It'll save your lungs and your marriage.
A Victorian ghost. I'm picturing it now. Okay, but let's get into the pro tips from those sources you mentioned. Nestor's talked about those inside corners. Those are the worst. You do one side, and then your knife digs into the other side and ruins it. It's an endless loop of frustration.
That's because you're trying to do both sides at once. Don't do that. Do one side, let it dry completely, then do the other side. Or buy a dedicated corner tool. But honestly, doing one side at a time is the Zen way to stay sane. Also, for outside corners, use a corner bead, either the metal ones you nail on or the paper-faced ones you mud on. The paper-faced ones are becoming the pro standard because they don't crack when the house shifts.
What about the screw pops? I see these in old houses all the time. Those little circular bumps that look like the wall is getting acne.
That usually happens because the drywall wasn't tight against the stud when it was screwed in, or the lumber was wet and it shrank. Here's a tip from the Mueller's construction book. When you're hanging, use a bit of construction adhesive on the studs, then screw it. The glue does the holding, the screws just provide the clamp while it dries, and don't overdrive the screws. If you break the paper face, the screw has 0 holding power. You want a dimple, not a crater.
I've definitely made some craters. I usually just fill them with more mud and hope for the best.
We've all been there. But if you break the paper, you might as well not have a screw there. Just drive another 1-2 inches away and do it right.
Okay, let's wrap this up with the moment of truth. Priming. I've seen people skip this. They just paint right over the mud.
That is a crime. Drywall mud and the paper on the board have different porosities. If you don't use a dedicated drywall primer sock sealer, the mud will suck the moisture out of the paint faster than the paper will. You'll end up with flashing, where you can see every single seam through the paint, no matter how many coats you put on.
So, the primer is the final peace treaty between the mud and the paper.
Beautifully put, it levels the playing field.
Tiger, looking back at all the tuition you've paid on drywall, what's the biggest takeaway for the person standing in the middle of a room, looking at 20 sheets of gray board and feeling overwhelmed?
Take a breath. It's just rocks and paper. The beauty of drywall is that it's infinitely repairable. If you mess up, you let it dry, you sand it back, and you try again. It's one of the few things in the shop where oops isn't permanent. But the real lesson? Respect the prep. If you hang it straight, the mudding is easy. If you mud it thin, the sanding is easy.
And if you cover the HVAC vents, the marriage is easy.
Exactly. Don't make the cat a Victorian ghost and you'll be just fine.
Thanks for the deep dive, Tiger. I think I'm actually slightly less terrified of the white dust now.
Just don't wear your favorite black shirt on mudding day. Ask me how I know.